Okay, I'm going to go through a game from the recent events, which has been annotated by the international Malcolm Pine in Chess Magazine. He titles it Shah-Mat. I'm going to quote him here. One of the great problems popularising the game, particularly through television or even live, is the difficulty beginners or even non-players have in understanding what's going on. This can be dealt with to an extent by expert commentary, but in the absence of that, perhaps the worst thing is when even very good players do not understand why one player resigned, or why a draw was agreed, or even that the game is finished at all. As he was attracted by an idea used at the challenge match, which I'm going to go through, and it's been coined the mate of the king, and it took place in Teheran before the troubled elections, and where A.Karpov took on the Iranian number 1, Ghaem Maghami. Now, chess was actually banned in Iran by a guy called Ayatollah Khomeini, who is this guy here, and his second name is pronounced Khomeini. Ayatollah Khomeini. And he was involved in a revolution which overthrew the emperor of the time, the Shah of Iran, and then he went on to do a number of other things which I haven't got time to go into. So anyway, the game starts off like this, and it was interesting that Karpov insisted defending the sharpest line of the Panov-Bolshevik attack against the Karakan. And I just have one last wee thing to show here, which is the Karakan Panov-Bolshevik attack, which is e4, c6, d4, d5, e takes d5, c takes d5, c4, knight f6, knight c3, and e6, and you can see it here. So the game we're going to play carries on like so. We've got e4, c6, d4, d5, e takes d5, c takes d5, c4, knight f6, knight c3, e6, which is the Panov-Bolshevik attack against the Karakan. And then the game continued with, bear in mind here that Ghaem Maghami is white and Anatoly Karpov is black. We've got knight f3, bishop b4, c takes d5, knight takes d5, queen c2, knight c6, and then a3, the most forcing move. Excuse me. Knight captures in d3, b takes c3, a5, and d3. Now, that's actually a pawn sacrifice by white, and it was first successfully employed in the game Najor's Portiche in the Barn Olympiad in 1962, but which Najorov later admitted was actually a blunder. We've got Najorov here, involved in many other things in chess, not many other things with, let's say, the Najorov variation of the Sicilian defence for one, but many other things. You could look him up and have a good read about him. He's an interesting guy. He said it was a blunder, so but it's actually, you can see that the d4 pawn here is about to be lost because the knight in c6 and the queen in d8 are two pieces attacking the d4 pawn, and the f3 knight for white and the c3 pawn are the two pieces that are defending d4, but black has his bishop on a5, which is pinning the c3 pawn to the king, and therefore it's a pawn sacrifice. Queen takes d4, bishop b5, bishop d7, and then castle and queen e5. The Chess Magazine goes on to say that in fact queen c3 would have also been quite successful, with bishop d7, king d7, queen a4, king e7, rook b1, bishop b6, and then bishop to b2. And Malcolm Pine says that is incredibly risky as well. Now, this is actually a good point to mention, that when he says it's incredibly risky, he doesn't go on to say why, so really the reader has to interpret that. So this is my own interpretation of why I think it's risky, which is kind of falls in line with the introduction to the video. So we've got, I think it's kind of risky because of the following play, which would be queen c5, bishop takes g7, obviously because g7 is hanging. He might not play it because it leads along to Karpov being able to play in the following continuation, which is rook on h to g8, and then bishop h6, queen g7, and now if white plays g3, which he might, the important part of this actual position is to notice that the f2 pawn is pinned by the bishop on b6, which would allow a continuation such as the following, which is a sacrifice of the rook on rook takes d3, h takes d3, queen takes g3 because the pawn's pinned, as I mentioned, then king h1, queen h3, king to g1, and rook to g8. So that's my own interpretation, which does actually look pretty dangerous. So after queen e5, instead of queen takes c3, which was an alternative variation by chess magazines or Malcolm Pine, I suppose, you've got queen e5, bishop takes d7, king takes d7, queen a4, king e7, rook b1, b6, rook b5, queen c7, queen g4, king f8. Now rather than king f8, chess magazine also says that bishop to c3, winning that pawn, and also defending g7 at the same time from the queen would have been better, and it probably would have left white play bishop to f4 and then queen c6, which definitely looked more along the idea for Karpov, but Karpov decided to play king f8, c4, h5 by Karpov, which looked enticing to me, because I thought that could have led to rook takes h5, rook takes h5, queen takes h5, and then queen g8, but you can, or king g8. But you can see here that white still has no attack really, and just has two weak pawns now, in a3 and c4, and probably one of which at least is going to drop very soon. So queen f3 followed by rook c8, obviously because the rook's under attack and you might as well double up on the c file. Bishop to b2, king g8, rook d1, h6, c5. c5 here. This is where the game starts to go incorrect for white. c5 is the wrong move. The move was rook to g5 to try and get a little bit of coordination on his pieces to start the attack on the king side, get all his pieces connected, hitting the same squares, and recapture the d file for himself. But instead of that, white plays c5, which just allows black to play a6, rook to b3, and queen takes c5, and then the game's pretty much over now, because you can see here the game continues g3, h4, and then rook to c1, which is the eventual blunder because it leads to queen takes c1, bishop takes c1, rook takes c1, king to g2, and then h3, and as I mentioned at the beginning of the movie, rather than checkmate, it's Shah-Mat is what they would say in Iran. So you can see there Karpov played a pretty nice game for black. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please stay tuned. Thanks.